In this lesson, I will show you how to create rectangles of specific dimensions. I will also show you how to create rectangles at an angle. To draw a rectangle in SketchUp with specified dimensions, you will use the Rectangle tool. However, if you wish to create a rectangle at an angle, you will have to use the Rotated Angle tool. In the open file, as you can see, 3 rectangles have been created. I have also placed the dimensions so that it is easier to recreate them. In the first example, I will create a 15 by 15 rectangle using the Rectangle tool. You can activate the Rectangle tool from the Draw menu if you hover the cursor over shapes and then select the Rectangle option. Alternatively, you can simply click on the rectangle icon, which you will find in the toolbar on the left. I will click on the icon on the toolbar. Automatically, the message, "Select First Corner," appears in the status bar. So, I will click on a random point to define the first corner of the rectangle. After defining the first point, the message, "Select Opposite Corner or Enter Value," appears, which means that I can either click again to define the opposite corner or define the length and the width. Before defining the dimensions, notice that as I move the cursor, an auxiliary line appears every time the rectangle becomes square. In the status bar, there is also the dimension field, which dynamically shows the dimensions of the rectangle as I move the cursor. At this point, I want you to notice the format of the dimensions. The first value represents the length, while the second represents the width. As you can see, length is separated from width with a semicolon. Therefore, to specify the exact dimensions, I will type 15, semicolon, 15, and then press Enter. The 15 by 15 rectangle has been created. In case I am not satisfied with the result or if I accidentally insert the wrong dimensions, I can type different dimensions as long as the Rectangle tool is still active, and the dimensions of the rectangle I created will automatically change. For example, if I wanted a 15 by 10 rectangle instead, would type 15, semicolon, 10, and finally press Enter. As you can see, the values of the rectangle have changed according to the values entered. Note that depending on the system settings on your computer, you may need to press the comma key instead of the semicolon key when you are typing the dimensions. If you are not sure which symbol to use, you can always check the field in the lower right corner of the application. In the next example, I will create a 15 by 20 rectangle, but this time I will not define the corner but the center of the rectangle. With the Rectangle tool active, I will press the Control key once, and then I will click to define the center point of the rectangle. As you may have already understood, by pressing the Control key once, I define the center of the rectangle first, and then I can define a corner or simply type the dimensions as I did before. So, I will type 20, semicolon, and 15, and then I will press Enter. As you may have noticed, the first value I type refers to the dimension that is parallel to the x-axis distance, while the second value refers to the dimension that is parallel to the y-axis. Once I have created the rectangle, I will press the space key to deactivate the command. As you saw, creating a rectangle is an easy process. In the following example, I will show you how to create rectangles at specific angles using the Rotated Rectangle. You can activate the Rotated Rectangle from the Draw menu if you hover the cursor over shapes and select the Rotated Rectangle. Otherwise, you can simply click on the Rotated Rectangle icon, which you can find in the toolbar on the left. I will activate the tool by clicking on the Rotated Rectangle icon. Once I move the cursor to the drawing area, a protractor appears. In addition, the message "Select First Corner" appears in the status bar, prompting me to define the first point of the rectangle. Like I previously did, I will click on a random point to define it. Once I do, the "Select Second Corner or Enter Value" message appears. This message informs me that I can define a second point by clicking, specifying the distance of the first side, or press Alt to change the angle of the rectangle. I want to create a rectangle with a 30-degree slope. To achieve that, I will press the Alt key once, and then I will look at the length angle field in the status bar. As you can see, I can now define both the length of the side and the angle of the rectangle. To set the length to 20 meters and the angle to 30 degrees, I will type in 20, a semicolon, then 30, and finally press Enter. Notice that a line is created, and the protractor moves perpendicular to that line. I will orbit the scene a little to see the result better. Now, to complete the rectangle, I need to define the width, so I will type 15 and press Enter. Before we finish the lesson, I should mention that when you are using the rotated rectangle, you need to define 3 points in order to create the rectangle, while the rectangle tool needs only 2 points to fully define the rectangle.